Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at Earth and Sky. And those of you joining us live, we appreciate you tuning in for our videos and are so happy to have you join us in this live talk today. If you haven't already, please hit that like button on the video and like our Facebook page too. If you want to make us really, really happy here, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, and we really appreciate that as well. If you like our content, please share it out with your friends and family. You never know who might see the video, and we hope that it has an impact on somebody's life. We have just a couple of announcements this week. If you are interested in the chakra class series that I have been teaching, we are talking about the crown chakra this Monday night, so that's tomorrow at 6 p.m. at Revive Wellness Spa, which is in Flushing, Michigan. And in that class, you'll be receiving a crystal. You'll have, if you haven't already joined us, you'll be getting a workbook. If you've already been coming, you'll be adding more pages to your workbook. And we'll also do a meditation. I will be bringing my ancestors bowl to that meditation as well as the gong. So it's going to be a really nice meditation as we talk all about the crown chakra, everything from how it relates physically to your body to mentally and emotionally, spiritually. We even get into things like mythical animals and what foods you eat to open the crown chakra. So it's chock full of tons of information. I hope you can join us Monday evening. And then the following Monday will be the origin and universal protection chakra. That's the feet and the knees chakra. Those will be combined into one class. Again, you'll get a stone for each of those chakras that night, so you get 2 that evening. And then we'll do the meditation and all of that as well. And also in May, I will be teaching more Reiki classes. Wonderful. I know I have been getting so many people asking me, and I have been really, really slacking. So I apologize on getting the Reiki 1 classes out there, but I will be teaching that. That's Reiki Shoden, and it will be about the beginning of May. I'll be doing a Monday evening class, and I'm also thinking I'm going to do a Saturday class as well. Seems like some people are preferring Saturdays, so if you're interested in the Reiki class, please mention in the comments or private message me to let me know if you're more interested in Monday evenings or Saturdays during the day, and I can get all of that wonderful information to you as well. And today, we are going to be talking about the concept of God. Something we haven't talked a lot about in our center, and it's an interesting thing because we have talked about the goddess, we've talked a lot about angels, we've referenced various god and goddess archetypes at different points a little bit, and
the stories
we've had guest speakers that came in that referenced Jesus, but God is a concept we've really stayed away from quite a bit. And it was interesting, even when we started our center, we went through a lot of different name thoughts because there's a lot of people that have what's called religious trauma. And it's something that I've dealt with quite a bit myself too.
I think most people that have gone to churches have some sort of
right, especially ones that kind of have, maybe pulled away a little bit, or they have questions and they are thinking more deeply about things, and it raises some different aspects, and that fear and the guilt can cause trauma.
Even the people that still go, like the ones that talk to you, sometimes they go, "Is this okay?" I mean, that's
right. There's a lot of religious trauma.
Been traumatized, I would say.
So even when we were starting our center, we went through a few different name thoughts. We talked about Earth and Sky Temple. I think that lasted a week or 2. I really liked that, but it didn't really fit. Yes, it was mine. Still have a file on the computer that says Earth and Sky Temple, but that's not where most of the stuff is. And then we started calling it Earth and Sky Church, and that lasted for a few months. And then we found out that there were people that weren't coming specifically because it was called church.
Yeah, because the idea was, in a church, at its base, it's supposed to bring a community here together, and it's supposed to, give you place where you feel like part of the community, you can learn things, you can grow as a person, you can grow emotionally, spiritually, that kind of a thing. And we were like, well then, that sounds...
We had donuts and coffee, and we were doing it live on Sunday mornings at that point. And
people didn't come because it was called church, and we had donuts.
They were Donna's donuts too. Those are
good
so
donuts. Good. So,
but
we got
and
out
those
of the
were
donuts.
and those were people that knew us too,
Yes.
so they know what our lifestyle is. They know what our thoughts and everything were, and so
Yeah.
it really surprised us. But it at the same time, it didn't surprise us
Yeah.
that the word church would
Yeah.
keep people away. And it's really sad that religion and dogma has gotten so in the way.
Yeah.
And so we decided to call it Earth and Sky Center, which really seems to kind of open it up. And we want to be a center of love, a center of hope, a center for people to learn to think for themselves, and a center where people can raise whatever questions they have, and we can feed our opinions into the answers,
have a
but we also
discussion.
want everybody else to contribute to that and to come up with what makes sense to you.
Yeah,
And-
because that's what it's about. I mean,
And
that's,
I loved one of the things that you said about,
with the, so we had a gentleman and come to the door today, and he had a very specific point I think he was trying to make. I don't think he ever quite got there, but he wanted, do you have a minute? I want to talk to you. And he brings out the Bible. And I said, okay. And we were trying to head out the door, but he was very insistent. And I said, sure. And so, and one of the things he was saying was, he said, I don't think God has expected us to live where there's crime or to live where there's, all of the things that are going on, specifically in Flint has, some issues. And I just was, and so after we parted ways, I was thinking about that, and I was like, I said, well, I mean, like for me, I'm not really a believer in God as a single entity, as a single concept. I don't believe that as a whole. And so when I was like, but, which means for me, God isn't real as a general statement. Now, for most people, God is real. And so the thing that makes God real, the thing that makes him there, the thing that makes that the feelings that you get for him and the reasons that you want to either appease him or pray to him or look to him for the support that you want, that's your choice. You create that God. And it was just as I was thinking, I'm like, well, so if people feel like they don't have control of their own lives, but they can create God, I would think that it would make it where if you look at that in those terms, if you look at it in the power that you have to create a God, then you should be able to create the kind of life that you want here as well.
and yet most people don't think of themselves as creating the God. They feel like they're under the power and under the control of a specific God that has been told to them, and a portrait that has been painted of what this God looks like to them. And so it feels like that power has been pulled away, when in essence we create everything within our lives, and we create the relationships that we have. And semantics gets in the way so much of these concepts sometimes as
Yes.
well.
Oh, absolutely.
And so if the version of, my version of what God is, and this is an interesting thing where I've just this last week healed religious trauma, because before I wouldn't have even claimed that word because the word triggered me too much. So
Yeah.
I would have said that my version of the goddess, or
Mhm.
my version of the universal consciousness, or,
Yeah.
something like
That wasn't God.
and knowing that it's the same thing, it's just semantics. I don't visualize, I don't believe in a wrathful, vengeful God. And that's what I have taken that word to mean, because so many churches, especially in this country, try to put this fear-based concept of, the concept of God is wrathful and vengeful, and if you don't do what you're told, and you don't, pray, and you don't, atone for your sins, and you don't sin, then you're going to this place called hell, and there's a devil, and there's all of these things, and the devil makes you sin, and all of these things
And if you look at humanity from an up high level, does that sound more like a God? Or does that
It's not
sound like
ego
what
within the human.
people do to each other? Does that not
Yes.
sound like that's a human coming up with a concept, as opposed to
That's a good
someone that's all powerful, that can create and make us go away in an instant, and they don't need us. If we're here at their whim, then why would they be so angry that we did whatever?
in a true level of that spirit of what I would consider God, which is now I'm comfortable saying in the same way that I would say universal consciousness or goddess or any of those other terms, that true level, that true spirit, it doesn't have ego, it doesn't have pride, it doesn't have a need to control or direct. That's on a people level. At that level, God doesn't have that. So I don't see any of those precepts, yet at the same time it's so freeing and so wonderful to feel that I've shed that ability where it held me back, or I felt I didn't want to even use that term or claim that word, which really strips you of power too, when you feel like there's a concept that is so beautiful. My concept of what I used to say universal consciousness was so beautiful. I see it as this huge ball of beautiful white light. It's full of love. It's unconditional love. It's what we all have within us. And yet, at the same time, I would tell somebody else, it's the same thing as, God or goddess. You can use whatever term you want. Yet I felt like I couldn't use that because I had allowed that power to be taken from me by people who use it in a controlling way. So it's really claiming your own power back when you heal that religious trauma. I had been in a Holy Fire 2 Karuna Reiki Masterclass, very long name, but it's it was such a healing and a remarkably incredible class. Words can't even begin to express the class. But one of the things that came through with it, one of the things the teacher had mentioned ahead of time that often will happen is healing religious trauma. And in my head I was like, well, that's great. I'm comfortable with where I'm at with religion. I don't need to use the word God or Jesus or any of that.
I'm not traumatized. I just stay away from it.
Right? Denial, best friend.
And it's fine. I drink, I get drunk, I fall down, no problem.
But there's no problem.
But there's no problem.
That's funny.
That's all right.
Sort of the same thing in a way, I guess.
The denial of it.
Yeah. And so it was interesting. About a month before, maybe 6 weeks before I started taking the class, I started realizing, having these realizations as the energy started working through me. And I started realizing I was feeling that I was working a bit more with Jesus, which I had done a long time ago, and had really turned my back on all of that because I wanted to have nothing to do with Christianity and the guilt and the fear that people and ego within man put into it. And so I started finding all of these things started working through me. And
in the Bible, Jesus is just pretty much a healer, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's all he claimed to be, right?
Yes.
I mean, from him, that's what I've always...
Yeah.
I wish I could say I know because I've read
healers.
it, but I haven't, so...
He's one of the master healers. I learned several Bible passages actually in this class too that were interesting about him as a healer. And there's a lot of things that lead into the possibility that he did Reiki specifically during several years of his life. I think it was from age 12 to age 30. There's no written text about what he was doing, yet he was traveling, it seems, through Asia and China and Tibet. And so that's the area, or India, Asia and Tibet. I don't know. Asia kind of encompasses a lot of those. So, but he was traveling right through that region where Reiki has started and where Reiki was really prominent during that era. And then it was when he came back from that he was performing all of these healings. And he said, you can do all of these things that I do and more. And there's so many different examples. And then he actually gave the power to heal to 12 of his disciples, which I didn't realize before.
Oh, sounds like Reiki.
And that's how Reiki is. With Reiki, you attune other people, so you give them the ability to heal. And there's many different things. It's very interesting, that lead to the fact that it's possible. We don't know for sure what it was called then, but it's quite possible that Reiki is what he was doing. And often when I would describe Reiki to people, I would say it's similar to the laying on of hands healing like Jesus did in the Bible. And so, but to have those links showing that in, especially now that I've healed that religious trauma, it feels like it's such a joyful thing to be able to connect with again now, and to not be so disenfranchised from the masculine version of God, and being
the human
feeling, And so one of the interesting things that had happened we did several meditations during this class as well. And I had talked to you about one of them where I felt I had gone up into this council. It was a council of several people. And within the council, I was a little surprised. I saw the first two I saw was Jesus and Buddha. And they had come, actually they came to me in other parts of the class before this too. And I was like, oh, it makes sense. Master healers working together. And when you're at a level where you're above ego, then differences that man puts on things, they don't matter, because it's that same thing where we've talked many times about how semantics don't get matter. Don't get hung up on the words or the names, it's the concept.
The concept.
And so it was the purity of the form of Jesus as master healer and Buddha as a master in so many ways. Compassion. The word karuna, from karuna Reiki, the word karuna means compassionate action. So it's taking action in a compassionate way. Healing.
So they were like, they were kind of the purest form of
compassionate
those
action.
things. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I saw both of them up here. And then on the other side, I saw Gandhi appear. And then next to Gandhi was a section within the council where it seemed the goddesses and the gods of the Roman and Greek lines would change. So the first one I saw in that spot was Ganesha. And it felt like at this level where the council is, they would refer to it as the third heaven. That's the purity aspect. So there's no ego. So man and plants and animals and everything that's of this earth is first heaven energy.
Oh, interesting.
And then we'll do another live talk on this at another time.
Yeah,
but then you have second heaven energy, which is different spirits and essences that still have an ego base. So they still have their own agendas at times. That's second heaven. And then third heaven is that purest form. So everything's based out of love. Everything is based, there's no ego.
Pure,
there's no,
just the purest concepts.
Yes. And so when I saw this council that formed around me, it was the purest aspect. So it felt as though with the Roman and the Greek gods, it felt like the stories that man has come up for them, they didn't have a role there. And it was the same thing in the corner where Jesus was, although Jesus doesn't have a lot of the connotations that we get in the Bible about God. But it felt like there was none of that ego, there was none of that good and bad and all of these delectable stories that humans like to tell about the gods and the goddesses.
To give a perception that they want to
humanize them.
Dehumanize them, absolutely.
Right,
because
right.
they can't be everything.
Right, right. And so it felt like all of those had fallen away, and this was the pure aspect of them. And so at another point when I went into the meditation, the spot where Ganesh was, it was the goddess Diana that was in there.
Ganesh?
Ganesh clears obstacles, and so and that made sense that he was the first one that I saw when I went to the council, because it was clearing obstacles, clearing out anything that I needed to have cleared.
Make things move.
Cleared the path, opened the way.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the purest form of that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it felt like they would all interchange in this one section within the council, and then there were many others that filled around them as well. But
so there was Ganesh, and then what was
and
the
then
next one?
Diana as well, and it just felt like there were many different ones that could fill in, and so it was very interesting. And then it just was so interesting coming out of it, feeling comfortable with the whole concept of God, where I just would not have been comfortable.
Yeah.
There was all of that religious shame, fear, guilt, dogma. I have complete respect for all religions, but I do not tolerate fear, shaming, that guilt. I don't think it's right to drive people to follow a certain belief by saying that if you don't do this, then this will happen.
Yeah.
Or that guilt that comes with it too. So because people aren't perfect. Nobody here is perfect. We're living human lives to have a lot of different experiences. We all tend to try to do the best we can with what we know.
Which we should.
Right, and that's important, and I believe that so one of the interesting concepts I'd heard recently from a couple different people was, if you don't believe in God, then where would you get your moral compass? Because that's the only way you can know to be a good person, is if you believe in God, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
What? Yeah, no, and I've heard that too, and then, because that's the sense is that God is where people they do the right thing because God is telling them to. And if that's the reason you're doing the right thing, then you aren't actually doing it for the right reasons.
And I believe in the spirit of good within people.
Absolutely.
And I think if instead
And
of...
you'll always find it.
I think that if instead of trying to put that fear in people of saying, you have to, because if you don't, bad things are going to happen to you for a really, really, really long time.
Yeah.
So I think that if you don't do that, but instead you say, treat people the way you want to be treated, and they will treat you back like that. If you live a life with kindness and integrity and respect, others are going to treat you that way as well. And I believe that people will. I really believe in that with people. Yet if you try to back somebody into a corner and say, I'm telling you, you have to do what I say, people are going to want to rebel against that.
Absolutely. They're going to want to not do that.
And that shows in so many aspects of culture and society.
Why we're having issues with things.
Exactly.
Specifically with the I'm so religious types.
Right.
Because some of the least trustworthy, some of the least pleasant, some of the least caring people I've ever met were extremely religious people. And I could never correlate that in my mind as the whole point is, the more religious you're supposed to be, in theory, at least that's the way I was raised to understand it, was the more religious you are, should be the better of a person that you are, and in actual functionality of life, living day to day, meeting people, understanding who they are. I found that to be very much not how it works.
And yet there are a lot of wonderful Christians too, and a lot of wonderful people
and
from all paths.
No argument there. Oh,
Right.
absolutely. And and I'm not saying, that like I said, those are the ones that I have met, that I've come
and
across.
That
And that's, the ones that the first words out of their mouth are something religious as a push. But at the same time, though, I still think the concept that goes with the church there, the foundation and what they're trying to get across, I think is a good thing.
That underlying message
Yes.
of we just need to pull the human ego out of it, and to
Yeah.
pull the control factors out of
Yeah.
it, and to allow people to ask questions. Because if you are able to ask questions and you're able to think, and you get past what the standard answers have been for the last few hundred years,
Which have
and
been because
of yes, and because of those control aspects, but instead think for yourself.
Yeah.
Empower yourself, develop your own relationship with God, and call it whatever you want, but don't not call it something because you feel like you can't, because there's that shame and that guilt.
Yep.
And sometimes it takes a lot to heal that within. It took a lot of energy work that we did this weekend, and it was amazing to feel the difference in the empowerment. I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't experienced it. But it's a wonderful thing that I'd like to see more people to be able to feel that freedom of lifting off that those layers that come in that you don't really realize how much they're affecting you until they're gone, I think, too.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's especially, that's all trauma kind of falls under that, I think. All things traumatic are you learn to deal, cope, and hide from it.
Right.
And then
whatever it is, wherever it came in with your life.
Exactly. And then you don't realize how it affects you, even though that most traumas affect people almost on a daily basis, on decisions they make and patterns that they hold on to, and that they, places they stay away from, whatever it is. But it affects them almost on a daily basis. And until you get rid of it, you don't realize the magnitude of how much any trauma can do to you.
Right, and that's such a big aspect of Holy Fire Reiki that I did not know I was walking into when I took this class. So
you were like, we're going to go over religious things? And it was like, oh, okay.
And it was fascinating the way that I've seen the universe play this out in my life over the last about a year, maybe a year and a half even, because I'm studying for my PhD in metaphysics currently, and I remember when the books first came for that, and I saw that they had Bible verses in different parts, and it was like, what? And then it mentions God, and it mentioned Jesus throughout a lot of it. And so first several chapters, I rewrote the chapters so that I was comfortable reading it. And then I would rewrite the affirmations so that I enjoyed them, just replacing simple little words And it's
running
like,
away
how
from
much
it.
time did I waste doing
Yeah.
that instead of realizing that the concept of
Embracing
God
that,
is what
yeah.
I make it. It's
Absolutely.
what my relationship is. It has nothing to do with the darkness that a lot of this world has put over it, that fear, that guilt, that shame, that blanket that has nothing to do with what I used to call the universe and what I can call freely now God or the universe or consciousness. And so it would encourage all of you to see what you can, to look within yourselves at how you can heal that, so that term doesn't trigger you, so those words don't trigger you, so that you can see it for what it is, that Jesus was a master healer. He was a wonderful person who was very compassionate and kind-hearted and wanted people to be the best that they could be as people.
Yeah, while they're here.
Exactly.
Because we're here in such a short span.
Right.
I mean, it's such a quick.
And whether you see the concept of God as your higher power or universal consciousness, whatever label it is, don't feel like you have to have certain words that you can't use, because that does strip your power away. So claim your power back.
Yeah, and if that's, so if God is something that you've always, something that you have to catch yourself from saying because you normally would,
Right.
you might want to look at that again, because that means that's the word that means the most to you, probably.
Right.
And you might want to get that back.
And there's nothing wrong if you choose, when you heal it, to go with other words. You know, I would probably freely go between a lot of the words.
Oh, absolutely.
But it doesn't mean you have to use one of the trigger words either. It's just
But it
feeling
means
that
but it's
freedom.
just knowing and that's part of trauma, I think, too, is recognizing it,
Yes.
to understand it.
And that goes with all forms of trauma, like you said, whether it's drug abuse or alcoholism or sexual trauma or
Yeah.
child abuse, all of those
Relationships, all of that.
relationships, divorce,
Yeah.
all of those things can cause trauma within us. And it's learning to look within. Sometimes it's learning to look within the shadow side of yourself and seeing where you have that denial, where you have that discomfort, and then learning how to heal that. And that's another thing. Holy Fire Reiki does a lot of specific things for the shadow self and the unconscious and all of
Shadow
those
self.
different layers and helping to pull it out. So it's my new word lately.
I love
using
it,
that a
shadow
lot.
self. It's this guy, he's over here, but I can't ever catch him. 'cause
And
he's
then the
like
sun
shadows.
moves and he's over here.
Yeah, it's so weird. He's so
Oh,
fast.
you're so funny. And have joy in your life too.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is you're doing, and as you're healing, whatever it is you're healing within your life, having joy, having laughter, even if you have to fake the laughter at first, it
Yeah.
really works. Laughter is
Fake
the
it
best
till-
medicine.
Fake it till it's real, right?
Exactly, yeah. And so many stories to share from this last week. I'm sure that will get infused into a few of the talks that we have coming up as well. But I do believe we're just about out of time for
Yep.
today. So I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you here, and I look forward to seeing your feedback down below as well. If you private message us, that's fine too. Please remember to share the video if you enjoyed it, and let us know if you're interested in either of the classes coming up. But you can message me to let me know if Saturdays or Mondays work best for you. We will quite possibly be doing them on both of the different days. So with that, I will bid you